Hi, I'm calling the July 11th, 2018 meeting of the Palm Springs Planning Commission to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Donenfeld.
Present.
Hirschbein.
Present.
Hudson.
Present.
Maruzzi.
Here.
Woods.
Here.
Vice Chair Callardine.
Here.
And Chairwoman.
Present.
7 members present. We have a
Do
quorum.
we need to, what do we do with these buttons? Push them, push on, push off?
For the members of the Planning Commission, when you wish to speak, please push the button so that you see the green light on your mic. And when you finish, please push it off. Thank you. Now that we're technically all in good standing, can I report on the posting of the agenda, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. The agenda was posted on Thursday, July the 5th. This meeting has been noticed and posted in accordance with state law.
Can I have a motion on the acceptance of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are at public comments. This time has been set aside for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on consent calendar and other agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission. Please note that the Planning Commission is prohibited from taking action on items that are not listed on the posted agenda. 3 minutes will be allowed for each speaker. Testimony for public hearings will be allotted at this time or at the time of the hearing. Members of the public who would like to comment on item 3A should comment on this portion of the agenda. For people who don't know, 3A is election of officers, but public hearing items are 2A, which is the text amendment, 2B Gannett Properties, and 2C JS Infrastructure. So if you're here on one of these 3 items, you may either testify now or testify during the public hearing on that item.
Madam Chair, I have a question. Regarding the text amendment, I thought we were moving it to the next meeting.
We are continuing the public hearing so that if any member of the public has come to testify on the text amendment, we can take their testimony, and then we will close the public hearing and adjourn it until the September 12th
understand.
meeting.
Thank you.
Keep the public hearing open.
We're going to keep the public hearing open on that item today, and it will also be open on September 12th. We anticipate there have been some changes to the text, and we anticipate additional changes on the 12th. So there is no, are there any members of the public who wish to testify? Going once, going twice. Since no one is testifying during the public hearing period, the public hearing is now closed. There are no items on the consent calendar. Item 2A is the City of Palm Springs for a zone text amendment to sections 91.00, 0.10, 93.05.00, and 94.03.00 of the Palm Springs zoning code relating to development standards for planned development districts and the requirements for processing PDD applications. Staff report, please.
Madam Chair, just by way of background, we received a letter from the tribe, the Agua Caliente Band of Coya Indians, asking us to defer action on any items that may impact the tribe, as they won't be having any meetings during the month of August and wouldn't have the opportunity to comment. And so that would impact the Planned Development District ordinance that you have before you now. It will also impact the golf course conversion ordinance, and then any land use items that would come forward within the boundaries of the reservation. And so for that reason, we are requesting to continue this item to the September 12th meeting. However, as you've already indicated, if there are any members of the public who would like to testify on this item, we would certainly welcome their comments at this point in time, but we will continue the public hearing to September the 12th.
And Mr. Director, on September 12th, you'll be giving a new staff report on this item, and people will be able to testify at that time.
That is correct, yes.
So if there are any members of the public who wish to testify in item 2A, the public hearing is open. There being no members of the public who wish to testify, the public hearing is closed, and I'll take a motion to continue the public hearing until September 12th, 2018.
So moved.
Second. This has been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. 2B, Gannett Properties 2014 LLC for a conditional use permit, adoption of a mitigated negative declaration under CEQA for a major architectural application for the construction of a 63,650 square foot cannabis cultivation and dispensary facility consisting of 4 separate buildings located at Garnett Road and Interstate 10 off-ramp, Zone M1P, Section 23. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to start with a description of the project site. If you can draw your attention to the map that's on the screens. The area in yellow is currently a 4.73 acre site that is adjacent to Garnett Road and Interstate 10, and then the new off-ramp that comes eastbound onto Garnett Road. So it's at the interchange of the I-10 and Indian Canyon Drive, which is on the east or to the right of the slide. Once again, the site currently will be subdivided into 4 separate lots, and the merger will happen on the other triangle lots to the north. So there are some mergers that need to occur in the future. So the site consists of 4 buildings on the lot, each being approximately 10,000 square feet for cultivation, and 1 3,650 square foot dispensary facility, which is on the very left of the slide or on the west portion of the property. So the site will be accessed by 3 separate driveways, and the buildings will be located in the middle of the lots with parking on all around the site. There also is pedestrian entrances from a new sidewalk that will be built along Garnett Road onto the site. The entire site is fenced with a fence that will be set back 20 feet from the Garnett Avenue, and it's a wrought iron fence, picket design. The building that's closest to Garnett Road will be set back 30 feet, which is within the development standards of the M1P zone. As I mentioned earlier, the dispensary will be in Building 1A, and there's a Building 1B, a Building 2A, a Building 2B, a Building 3A, and a Building 3B, and then the final 4th building is off to the right along the off-ramp. So the buildings will be constructed of a material that is a tilt-up concrete with stucco pop-outs that will frame the windows and doors into the site. In this slide, the top slide shows the dispensary entry with a canopy that will delineate as to where the public space is, how you get into the public retail section. The building heights are 23 feet, 6 inches tall, and a parapet increases the height to 29 feet, 6 inches. The buildings are 1 story, and the M1P zone allows a maximum height of 30 feet. So it does conform to the height of the zone. Mechanical equipment will be located on the roof. There is a screen of corrugated metal that's a gold color that will hide all of the mechanical equipment from the street. The material board has been passed around for the Planning Commission to see, and it includes paint chips of the colors. This is a slide of the landscape plan that's proposed. The AEC reviewed this project on April 16, 2008, and they had several comments, and one of them was to simplify the landscape plan, which this is a revised plan that was reviewed by the or the AAC. And when I say simplified, it means they reduce the number of plants, they reduce the types of plants to be a more desert hardy variety that will withstand the wind and the heat that is out along the north end of town. Couple of the other requirements from AAC was to add a canopy or some denotation above the dispensary. Where we go back to the slide, that is what the metal awning is above the windows and the doors, showing where you go into the dispensary.
Could you point that out on the slide?
Sure. So in the previous example, this canopy on these two entrances were not on the plans. Now they're on the plan. So I'm just going to flip through some slides. These are the flat line elevation showing the slopes of the roof, the mechanical equipment, corrugated metal that will hide the equipment on the roof. The walls are scored to add some architectural detail, and then the pop-outs will angle back towards the roof or
Can you
towards the floor.
Go back to the colored slide and just show us what that material is that will hide the equipment? Which one of them it is?
I'd have to defer to the architect, is it? I think it's there's the tan color in the top, and then the number 7 on the bottom, it's the middle.
Thank you.
There we go. We have some slides of the roof, and this shows the mechanical equipment, and there will be solar panels that are proposed to be added to the roof itself. This is a slide of a cross-section as you view the project from Garnet and from Interstate 10. As you can see, will be a low-slung one-story building with a maximum height of 29 feet. So the project was reviewed, or an initial study was prepared for the project to conform with the California Environmental Quality Act. It was prepared by Terra Nova, who analyzed technical studies, and there was a mitigation measures in relationship to biological and cultural resources. The biological would mean that when grubbing or grading would take place, there would be a monitor on site to make sure that there were no endangered species that would be displaced, and also in cultural that if there were any artifacts of a tribal nature, there would be someone on site to monitor that activity. So notice was given to the public regarding this hearing. There is also notice that was given, and a notice of intent was prepared for the adoption of the mitigated negative declaration. There are findings that the Planning Commission need to make in order to approve a conditional use permit, which were in your staff report. There are also findings that that are made for meeting architectural review, which is also in your staff report. There was some additional information that was handed out today that included company ownership information. There was a quest about who actually is Garnet Properties LLC. You'll see that that is in your packet of information. The applicant has received a cannabis license from the city and the state to partake in cultivation, manufacturing, testing, and that application, that license is in your packet also to review. In the very last page of the additional information, there are 3 conditions that we'd like to add to the conditions of approval. One is a cleanup of a condition that talks about odors. If the property were to ever emit odors in the future, we have some conditions that will hopefully eradicate that issue or that problem. So at this time, I'd like to bring up Nicole Chris from Terra Nova to discuss the environmental or answer any questions regarding the CEQA analysis.
Welcome.
Now it's on.
There it is. This is intimidating. To clarify the biological mitigation, it's related to the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which requires that, that we assure that there not be nesting birds on the property when grubbing occurs. And so that mitigation would be a pre-construction, pre-grubbing activity, that a biologist would make sure that there are no nesting birds on the site. The tribal monitoring, I'm sure the commission is aware that those conditions are almost always applied now. The tribe wants to make sure that there are no resources on the site.
There are questions for staff or for Nicole?
I have questions for staff, but not for Nicole.
Questions for Nicole?
Nicole, my question is, with respect to this monitoring, both with respect to migratory birds and historic artifacts, are the monitors, who are themselves professionals in their particular skill sets, are they there on an ongoing basis, or are they there when they initially start scrubbing the land? Because my question would be, in the course of the construction, things might occur that a specialist or a technician might want to take a look at. Are they on call? Do they do one look over and then they're on call in case something happens? And are we relying on the developer then to spot a potential migratory bird nest, if you will, or an architectural artifact?
As regards the birds, the survey is done right before grubbing. And the presumption is that when vegetation is removed, the hazard for the birds is also removed, since birds will nest either under or on vegetation. And so that is not an ongoing monitoring.
So they make one very careful analysis, and once the grubbing occurs, it is impossible for nesting to occur?
That is the presumption, yes.
Okay. And that is the
And
fact.
it is consistent with the requirements of law, that the survey be done immediately before the grubbing occurs, and monitoring is not required after that. For practical purposes, no self-respecting bird is going to look at a construction site and think that it's an appropriate place to put a nest if we've made sure that there is no bird there before we start grubbing.
Have we determined that there are no protected species on the site?
There are no non-MSHCP protected birds on the site. There are common birds on
Okay.
the site, yes. As regards the archaeological monitoring, that is different. That monitor stays on the site and inspects as grading and excavation occurs, because oftentimes resources, particularly in this area where there's been a tremendous amount of windblown sand over the years, resources can be found at depth. And so the monitor stays until that monitor, who is qualified by the tribe and knows what he's looking for and what the potential is for buried resources, until that monitor determines that monitoring is no longer necessary.
Thank you.
Other questions for Nicole, Michael? I have one for Nicole. Planning Commission number 4, have you looked at it, and does it meet the concerns that were shown about regarding odors? Maybe,
The short answer is no. Yes, this is this assures ongoing.
for the public, this requires air filtration and also ongoing monitoring if there are concerns or complaints raised.
Yes, and this would address the long-term potential. Some of the jurisdictions in which we work for these kinds of facilities require that the specifications for the odor control system be included in the application packet. But in this case, it will be reviewed at building permits.
And Madam Chair, I would just add to that, there's language in the city's municipal code relative to cannabis-related businesses and odor control requirements. We refer to those in our conditions of approval, and so by referencing the code, they would always be applicable to this particular facility.
Thank you. That is a specific concern with this type of business. Commissioner Woods, questions on it for Nicole?
Hi, Nicole. Quick question for you. When you looked at this, it's 4 separate buildings that would be approving potentially in perpetuity. What kind of land use did you use? And I read here, but I want to hear from you.
In what regard, sir?
Let's take traffic as an example.
I'm sorry, but we have too many of these going at once, and I don't trust my memory.
So I can point you to the page to help you.
Oh, we always use ITE. What I was checking for was whether or not a traffic study was provided to us in this case, and it was not. There are now ITE standards for cannabis dispensaries, and so we use the ITE standard for that. There are not ITE standards for cultivation yet. There have not been enough studies done to derive a trip. And so we, in multiple jurisdictions, have used the wholesale nursery because it has, the use has characteristics of a wholesale nursery. There was a time we used agriculture, that has passed. So the wholesale, these are not big, the cultivation portion of this is not a big traffic generator other than employee trips.
So just if I can follow up on a question, and maybe some work can be done in the background, and maybe it does not need to be done. But we just received a memo on our dais today that changed the land use from completely cultivation, and you're using nursery, to cultivation, manufacturing, transportation, and distribution. And I would assume that's a different load for traffic that we probably want to put into the record.
Well, not really, because a wholesale nursery would also be involved in transporting its materials, and so that factor would be part of the ITE trip generation code. The manufacturing involves the distillation of the product on site, and distribution is at the equivalent of the wholesale level from these facilities. They transport to dispensaries or other manufacturing facilities. It is not a retail facility, with the exception of the dispensary.
Thank you, Nicole.
Are there any other questions for Nicole? Flynn, do we need to take action on the negative deck separately?
No, it's incorporated in
We
the-
can incorporate it in the, okay. Questions for staff, starting with Mr. Commissioner Hirschbein and going around.
Thank you. Could you go back to the slide that locates the site on the aerial? Okay, thanks. So as I understand it, the off-ramp from I-10 traveling eastbound would be just to the left of where the photograph ends?
That's correct.
It's also an onbound.
On the right. Oh, I'm sorry.
Right, so it's here,
Okay.
is coming off eastbound, and this is going westbound.
Okay. So, and then Garnett just dead ends up to the west.
Actually, it's going the other way. It goes the other way. I took it last night.
Garnett continues out into the desert to the windmills.
Oh, all the way, okay. And then, so my question is, I guess it's more of a statement, but it's really a question. The visibility of the site would be from I-10 traveling east. Is that's correct? You would see the buildings as you're traveling east, continuing on I-10?
Right, let me get to a slide.
You're coming off.
Right, so this is the I-10, so you would see this building, this building, this building, and when you come down the ramp, you'd see this building.
Okay, and then as you're traveling west, you probably wouldn't see the first 3 buildings, but you might see the first building, the number 4 building.
Right, so number 4 sets back 100, 150 feet from the I-10, where building 4...
But it's sort of angled out toward, is it angled out? I don't remember. No,
Right.
it's not.
I mean,
It's not real, okay.
they're not
Okay.
exactly perpendicular to the freeway.
Right, and then obviously it would be visible as you exit onto the Indian Canyons Drive or Avenue, whatever it is, exit on your right, you would see it as you're approaching Palm Springs.
Yes.
Okay, all right, I just wanted to understand that, thank you.
Other questions for staff?
I just have two. With respect to landscaping, in connection with the AC's recommendation that has been implemented by the developer, are there any trees, Palo Verde trees being lost by the change in the landscaping plan? Because those are going to be shading the parking lots.
Right. They provided Palo Verde trees and ironwood trees, which are both hardy desert trees. It was more removal of things like palms and other trees that would not weather the heat and the wind.
But those will stay.
The trees that make the shading requirement are remaining. Yes.
Okay. My other question is, parapets are very visible on these properties because they're very close to the end of the buildings. Am I to assume that the reason we're seeing the parapets so prominently is because so much equipment has to go on the roofs of these buildings because of the cultivation requirements?
Partially because the slope of the roof, as you can see, and the project architect can describe this, but the parapets are tall to hide the large amount of equipment. So these uses use a lot of cooling equipment on the roof. So it is to screen that, and then you can see the corrugated metal it stays at a horizontal plane while the building drops.
And in building 5, which is a more of a normal shaped building, a rectangular building, you see it quite prominently there as well.
You mean the parapet?
Yes. Looks like it's the bottom, yes. And how close to the edge of the building is that parapet?
I'll have to have the architect describe it.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Callardine.
Yeah, I've got several questions actually mostly regarding the staff report. There's one typo on the bottom of the Planning Commission resolutions, draft resolution, bottom of page 2 of 6. We're missing the actual condition that does the sentence there ends with the at the bottom of the page. I think that's where you're certifying the negative deck.
Correct. I'll fix that.
Fix that. Then I think engineering condition 2, it's talking about applicant shall obtain state permits for the approval of plans for any work done on State Highway 111, which I don't think is around here. So I think it needs to be Interstate 10.
Noted.
Okay. And with respect to that, what is the plan for the sidewalk on the whole Garnet Road frontage? Where will it extend from and to?
So condition number engineering 6 on page 13 of 23 says, construct an 8-foot wide sidewalk behind the curb along the entire frontage in accordance with the Palm Springs standard drawing number 210. So let me go to
Okay.
a plan here. And maybe Rick can. Assuming it would go, there's a sidewalk that currently exists here.
Oh, there's one that exists there already?
Well, it dead ends. There may be a connection that would have to be made here.
Yeah,
It
correct.
would extend the whole way to the
Yeah,
end.
My question is whether it does connect with that existing sidewalk to at least bring it up to the intersection of the off-ramp?
It would connect to that sidewalk.
Okay.
Yeah. They would need some modifications to be done to the existing ramp that's there now.
Okay, so that would require a permit from Caltrans, so.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, that's
To
what I was.
Interstate 10, not Highway 111.
I noticed that. Looked like a canned condition, didn't it? Yeah, I just want to make sure, well, I can't say it becomes a policy thing, but
You can make a condition later.
we'll make a condition later to make sure that it continues all the way to the I-10 intersection.
Continuing with questions for staff, Commissioner Hudson?
Yes, thank you. I'm just looking at the roof plan on sheet A6.1. It actually shows the roof plans for just 2 of the buildings, which is fine because I think it does give an example of the roof, typical roof layout. I guess my question is, it's showing solar panels. The question is, are those in fact going to be built, or are those just placeholders for future solar panel locations?
Well, as you can tell by the buildings, they're pretty utilitarian. They could be used in the future for warehousing, and the applicant may be able to answer that question about the specifics of the solar panels, if they're going to be part of the cultivation facility or if they would be used in the future for warehousing.
So staff isn't requiring them at this point in time? It's not in your conditions?
That's correct.
Okay, well, maybe that sort of does lead into my other questions. I'm sure it's in the staff report or in the project report. I'm just trying to get an idea of how many people, staff-wise, will be involved in this facility in terms of growing, cultivation, the other dispensing functions and so forth. And then I guess that leads into my final question is, if in the future these buildings become a different use, does the parking as is shown, I guess, meet standard industrial zoning type requirements? And maybe that's a question either for the applicant or the architect.
Actually, I'll go ahead and respond to that, Madam Chair. In terms of the parking requirements for our cannabis-related uses, they are similar to our warehouse or industrial standards. So for example, for cultivation and manufacturing, we require 1 space per 800 square feet, gross square feet, which is similar to our warehousing and storage requirements. For the office or the dispensary uses, they're required to provide 1 space per 300 square feet, and that is very similar to our other office-related parking requirements. And so they're more or less the same. It could support different uses in the future and would have adequate parking under our current parking standards.
Thank you for that.
Right, if I could respond. So there are total required of 88 spaces with the uses. They're providing 158. So they are overparked.
Commissioner Marizzi, questions? for
No
staff?
questions.
Commissioner Woods?
Can you tell me exactly what type of, regardless of the CUP, the underlying approval, what type of land use are we looking at approving here?
An industrial land use that meets the regional commercial business general plan land use designation.
And under that designation, do we require loading zones?
In what sense of loading zones? You mean on the site?
That's correct.
It's not in the zoning code that loading zones would be, you mean for no parking in those loading zones or?
Well, traditionally in industrial zones, you have industrial trucks that come in, or you have types of trucks that load and unload. If you're looking at distribution, you normally you need turnarounds, you need turning radius. As I understand in the previous question, no traffic report was submitted. So I wanted to see what our requirements are for an industrial land use for loading and unloading of goods.
Sure. So if you look at this plan in front of you on the slides, let's look at building A, which is the one on the very far left. We see 2 loading areas or loading docks.
Can you point them out?
Sorry.
And maybe take your mic.
Sorry. We see 2 loading areas here, and in these buildings are other loading zones throughout the site to gain access into the building. So the zoning code does require that specific radius be no more than 2%, which these curves all meet the zoning code requirement. So a truck would be able to come into the site and maneuver correctly.
Thank you very much. The other question I had is one of the conditions, condition number engineering 7 on page 13 of 23. I assume that condition also means that a pedestrian can travel from the sidewalk without having to use a vehicular driveway into the site. That would be a requirement?
So on the site plan, it shows pedestrian access here through a gate, a pedestrian gate here from the sidewalk. And then at each of these buildings, there are pedestrian connections.
Great, thank you very much. And then under the, in the mitigated neg deck, it talked about the CVAG bike plan and the city's bike plan. Can you just explain how this integrates with that along with Sunline?
Right, so I have a slide here of the city bike plan. And currently there is a bike path that runs along North Indian Canyon Drive that continues over the I-10 and into Desert Hot Springs. So there is a bike path or a designated bike trail or bike way that will skirt the site. It'd be easier for a bicyclist to make a left-hand turn and go down Garnett to the site. As far as a bus connection, the closest bus route is along Gene Autry Trail, so that really does not provide a bus connection. There is no bus connection to there.
Okay. And has the applicant?
Maybe Nicole.
I'm sorry, Nicole.
There is a bus line that runs on North Indian Canyon and turns up towards Palm Canyon, roughly at San Rafael. But Sunline does not have service on north of that point on Indian Canyon.
Flixbus does though, right?
The
It's
sundial?
I think there's a new bus line called Flixbus, and it goes in between Palm Springs and other cities.
Right, it would go, there's a stop in there at that interchange and you can connect into Los Angeles and points west.
And has the applicant provided any sort of bicycle parking on the project site?
It is a requirement that the planning commission could make, that they provide bicycle parking,
Okay.
a lockup facility.
And the last question I have for staff, and this may not be a fair question, but it came in our on our dais today. On a cultivation, what exactly is the taxing mechanism that the city actually generates revenue from? Because there's a retail portion, the dispensary I understand, but on the actual cultivation side of it. And again, this might be an unfair question, I apologize. But
And I will apologize, I don't know the percentage of tax on cultivation.
Okay.
It wouldn't really be a land use consideration here.
Right, no, but thank you.
I have just a couple of questions. When the AAC suggested rock, did the AAC require no DG and a rock size for ground cover?
Yes, the AAC was concerned about the wind conditions up in the north end of town, and they were afraid that the DG would be blown away, which we all know that does happen. So the applicant has offered to do 3/4 inch desert gold crushed rock at 2 inches depth. And they can address that when they come up and give their presentation.
And is that part of the conditions? Because I didn't see it in.
It's not, it would be a revision to the site plan or the landscape plan. It would be stamped and recorded.
So that we would put it in our conditions that happened?
Yeah, that could be one of your extra conditions.
Okay. At this point, if there are no more questions of staff, I'm going to open the public hearing on this. The applicant has 10 minutes for an initial presentation. Is there somebody who has a time clock here?
I've got my phone.
Perfect, thank you. Are you our official timekeeper? Then members of the public can speak. You will have 3 minutes, and the applicant will have a 3-minute rebuttal. Just for everyone, at that point, we will open questions for the applicant before I close the public hearing so that any responses they give us are part of the public record. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. James Cioffi, architect. I'm representing the applicant. I am the architect. And I don't have a real big presentation. I'll just hit some of the highlights. We designed this project to be an industrial park type project. That's what the zone is. That's what the land use is. It was brought up several times. It's a M1P property, and we've done a lot of these before, but we tried to make the buildings reasonably interesting to look at. We sloped the walls and then left the parapet screens straight. There was a question about the location of one of the screens. It's quite a ways back on that building. The flat elevation doesn't really show it, but it's back 30 or 40 feet. I'm not sure. If you look at the 3D views, and those views are like taken from eye level, you won't see much of those metal parapets. One of the AAC members asked that they not be glare prone, which I indicated that by the time the wind blows a couple of months, all the finish will be gone off them anyway. But that's a gold ribbed metal that we've used before, and if you look at some of my other work, you'll see it. But that's the idea. They're poured-in-place tilt-up concrete buildings with stucco eyebrows. They asked me to look at an eyebrow for the dispensary, which kind of denotes the entry, and we did something very similar to we did at Smoke Tree Commons with an eyebrow that could hold a sign. The other buildings, the cultivation activities are not signed, and so we just left them plain. The property is fenced, and we had quite a discussion about the landscaping because we're pretty sensitive about what goes on up there. The wind is brutal. We did the train station, which is not far from here. We had pretty good luck with the Palo Verde trees at the train station. They bend over a little bit, but they didn't blow away. The palm trees, we have some palm trees at the train station that have held up. But the idea was to simplify and get rid of a lot of the ground covers and things like that that were just going to get buried, get more rock on the site, maybe some boulder work, try to keep as many shade trees as possible, again, with the limits of the site. And so that's what we tried to do. We did a monument sign, a poured-in-place monument sign that says Garnett Business Park on it, and again, to try to keep it looking like a business park. We wanted to make sure it looked nice from the freeway. Some of the buildings out there don't look so good. We think this one will look fine, and happy to answer any questions that the commission may have.
We'll go through the public hearing and then bring you back.
Okay.
I know that there'll be questions.
Very good, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this item? There being none, Mr. Chiaffi, please come back up. We don't want you to get too comfortable in that seat out there.
I'm comfortable in this seat, Madam Chair. Okay.
I don't imagine you have a rebuttal, so questions from the commission for the applicant? Are there, just one, I have only maybe two. Are you comfortable with doing some kind of bike parking or
Sure.
bike storage?
Yeah, that's a simple thing, of course.
And did the Palo Verdes hold up? I live next to the wash, and ours lose their leaves in bad windstorms.
Yeah, they're a little tougher to work with, the Palo Verdes. They can blow over. They need to be staked and they need to be checked occasionally. The key is to get them in and get them staked real well, so they'll go through 1 or 2 wind seasons. Then generally they're okay. Again, if they're not guy wired down, they'll blow over. And the Palo Verdes will die if they blow over. The mesquites will not. The mesquites are designed to blow over. They grow horizontally, as you all know.
Okay,
I think you had a question about the solar panels too. We
yeah.
did a solar panel layout. We're not required to put solar panels on the buildings, but we wanted to see how it would lay out if that solar panels won't augment the cultivation facilities, but they could be used for office lighting, some landscape lighting, things like that. And again, we designed this building to M1P standards, so it's parked for a business park. The turning radii are all for trucks. And that sort of thing, and if it went back to a business park at some point in the future, the solar panels might come in handy for that.
It's still in front of me, so for the record, can you, since the manufacturing came up later in a letter, can you read into the record exactly what they're going to be doing for manufacturing, or is the applicant here and
Maybe
can
the
they answer
applicant
that?
can tell you more about that. I don't have the letter in front of me. He prepared the letter. Maybe he would like to, if that's okay with you.
That would be good. I think we do want that in the
Okay.
record.
Any more questions for me?
There is one more, just in the letter. It said any mention of cannabis cultivation should be replaced with medical and cannabis operations. Is that correct?
He'll address that. I
Okay.
think that is correct, though.
I have one question,
Commissioner.
just raising, this is effectively kind of a greenhouse, right? And can you put solar panels on a greenhouse without blocking the light coming?
No,
in?
they're not greenhouses.
Okay, they're not-
No, they're tilt-up buildings. Okay, thank you.
And if the applicant's here and they would come forward. There are two questions that I've had, which is it correct that you want everything to say medical and cannabis operations? And then can you please explain to us what manufacturing will occur on site and what that means?
Yes, cannabis operations, just because it allows some flexibility and goes along with whatever permitting will be allowed at the site. And my name is Michael Fine, by the way, and Madam Chair, Commissioners. I don't know exactly what the manufacturer is going to be. Chances are it's going to be one of those buildings will be set aside for that purpose. There's a variety of types of manufacturing to do. It'll probably be a non-volatile process that they have. They are getting into cryogenics now, as I understand it, which will allow for temperatures to be brought down, even make it safer, and closed-loop systems. And so that's my understanding of how that would be at the time. But it will need to go between fire and the state and other local and state agencies and be cleared through them at the time that would occur.
So what you're saying is that you'll go through a permitting process before manufacturing takes place, and so you don't know yet what equipment or whether there are any special issues with the equipment. And do you know generally what products you're going to be manufacturing?
Primarily, it's like the oils and stuff that are done for pipes and that. That's generally, it's like an extraction process, I believe, is primarily what it's done. There might be some edible products that become part of that as well, but then that goes through another whole process that involves the health department and the county and other agencies as it involves that in the state as well.
Thank you. Does anybody, Flynn, do
Madam
you have
Chair, if I
questions?
could just add to that, the city has issued an administrative permit to the applicant for cannabis uses, and the administrative permit is for both medical cannabis and adult use cannabis. We'll make sure that our conditions of approval reflect that, and then we will also add the manufacturing use to the conditional use permit, so it's clear in the conditional use permit that they do have the ability to do those uses.
And we don't need to add distribution to that, is that correct?
Correct, because distribution and transportation are permitted uses in the zoning district, that we don't need to include them in the conditional use permit itself. They are permitted by right in that zoning district.
Thank you. No, any other questions? The matters before the commission, thank you.
Thank you.
Comments? Commissioner Hirschbein.
Well, this is just an aside, but having grown up in the 60s, this whole discussion is really weird to me. But anyway.
And if you grew up in the 60s, you can't remember the minute.
Yeah, exactly. Usually on these types of buildings, I'm pretty, I don't have a strict level of quality or architectural integrity that I'm looking for, because mostly they're kind of hidden. But to me, this site represents an entrance to our city. I know it's not the main entrance, I think that's reserved for 111, but I think enough people visiting from the coastal areas exit onto North Indian that this becomes a prominent site, not a premier site, but it is prominent. And to me, there's a lack of taking that into account. I realize what the buildings are; they're tilt-up buildings. But for instance, that building 4 on both the north and the east elevations is going to be paid attention to by people using that exit ramp and the entrance ramp there. And at a minimum, I'd really like to see those two elevations have a little more attention paid to them. actually a lot more attention paid to them. They're really elevations that will be seen by a lot of people. And I think that maybe that kind of got lost in the site planning where it's just over at the end and we won't really need to do too much to them. And then I understand the AAC's concern about calling some architectural attention to the entrances to the dispensary building. I just think it's a kind of a weak gesture. I'd like to see those eyebrows beefed up, or maybe even a canopy that extends out in some fashion with some column, little steel posts that are holding them up, something that makes it a little bit more of a statement. But I really think this is unlike a lot of tilt-up buildings that we've looked at, or I've looked at, both at AAC and Planning Commission, where the traffic doesn't warrant more attention paid to the architecture. But in this case, I think it does. I really think this site is prominent enough that another look needs to be had to make it more of a statement as you're entering the city.
Commissioner Donenfeld?
Yes, I don't know why, I usually agree with my fellow commissioner, Mr. Hirschbein. I don't think this is a very prominent site. I've gone on that on and off ramp many, many times. You're very concerned about being sure that you're in the line of traffic, that you're being safe when you do it. And if you look at the environment and the neighborhood in which these are being built, there is nothing distinctive about the architecture surrounding this site. And in fact, I think, granted, this may not win an architectural award, I think it is perfectly fine for the use and the location in which it's being proposed. So I'm in favor of it.
Commissioner Callardine?
I'm going to concur with Commissioner Donenfeld on that subject. I really don't have any further comments on this other than I want to make sure we get the sidewalk in along the entire frontage. And I'd like to maybe step back for a second. This is not really for this project, but stepping back to my years on the General Plan Steering Committee, we did identify this area as a potential future major business complex and also maybe commercial. And this is, I have no problem with this project, but it's getting a lot of little spot projects happening here and there with no overall real master plan of that area. And I doubt we have the money for it, but it would certainly be nice to have a nicer master plan of this area and potentially the Gene Autry Trail at I-10 intersection as well. So we don't just get a series of spot projects without a cohesive whole. How we do that, I don't know, but it's certainly something to think about.
Commissioner Hudson?
Okay. Actually, I agree with certain points of each of the three previous commissioners. So I'll be tactful about this. First of all, I agree with Commissioner Donenfeld. Actually, I think this architecture for the building type is very good. I think Mr. Chiaffi, has a track record. I think he's done some good projects throughout town. I think, in my mind, the simpler, the more minimal the building, the better at this location. I do agree with Commissioner Hirschbein about the entry. I think the attempt that was made to add the eyebrows or the canopy at the dispensary entries is a little bit weak. I would as well like to see those two canopies be a bit stronger and form a more of a welcoming entry gesture, since truly that's the only building location that invites the public. And then finally, to address Commissioner Callardine, I agree. This project, I'm sure, will be a good one. It provides jobs, it provides tax revenue, but as I'm not sure my zoning or land use terminology here, but it is adjacent to an interstate highway. And usually, in my mind, those are locations for businesses which cater more towards the motorist, let's call it that. And I think it is sort of a missed opportunity in this case, that this site couldn't have been something Dare I say it, but more fast food restaurants, but, that's what happens, that's the reality of it. But that's, I think, a larger statement, and I think Commissioner Callardine is spot on, and that we sort of need to look at more of these sites in a cohesive way. But just to reiterate, I think this is a quite a good project, and I support it.
Commissioner Maruzzi?
I think this is a perfect project for this area. I mean, the wind is unbelievable, and I can't see too many other commercial uses or industrial uses that would work. Fast food, your food would just blow away as you drove through the drive-through.
Your smoke's going to get blown out.
I like the design of the buildings. I think they're appropriate for this location, and I like the minimal aspect. I mean, can we put in a condition regarding these eyebrows based on?
We're not doing conditions yet. You're just making general comments.
Okay, then. But
Commissioner
I
Wood?
think these are the right buildings for this site.
I agree with all the commissioners, actually. I do think that the bigger planning issue at some point needs to be addressed. I know we can't do it in this particular instance, but I think it's an incredibly valid point as we move forward to continue to reinforce us as a world-class city. And I think cannabis cultivation will be something that will put us on the map as world-class as well. So having the architecture kind of match what goes on could be a good thing, It could be a nice thing when you come in.
You suggesting a mural?
We could. It could be a good thing. I do have one thing, both for the applicant's protection and our protection, is the trip generation for this was done for nursery. It's way under anything that would be significant, but I think we need to put something into the record, and maybe they can get us the numbers right now. Just that this actually is going to be manufacturing. So those numbers might be a little bit different for trip generation. I think we probably can do it today. If Nicole can call with those numbers, I don't have them at my fingertip. And the other thing that I might suggest is the Sunline is doing a huge study to try and get workers in the agricultural field around. They have a real tough time getting to their jobs right now. And a lot of Sunline, as we were just demonstrated, doesn't always service areas that these workers would go to. So it's on the forefront of their thoughts, and they're looking at flex things and all kinds of stuff. But a lot of agricultural workers will also ride their bike and take it with the bus. So I'm really highly suggesting that for each of those separate parcels that we put in bike boxes, because bike boxes will protect it against the sand and the wind. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Just in general comments, I agree with what I've heard from the commissioners. I do think the eyebrows should be enhanced. I am concerned in general, although I do think the marijuana dispensary may be general public serving. We don't quite know how much use that's going to have yet. But I think it's appropriate for the site. We are getting to making, and I see general support for this. I didn't see support, Commissioner Hirschbein, for changing the street face, the freeway face on Building 4. But I think we're pretty close to a motion. It does need to include, if someone is going to make it, you need to include the revised conditions.
Okay, I will move the staff recommendation, inclusive of the resolution that adopts a negative declaration, inclusive of the two amendments that we got this afternoon. And I think we have at least two additional conditions. One would be to ensure that the sidewalk is continuous from the I-10 off-ramp to the western project boundary. And two would be to fix the eyebrows. However you want to.
I'll second it. We have a proposal for bike boxes at every of the four buildings.
Okay, and for bike boxes at each of the four buildings.
Are there any other conditions that are suggested? And in terms of the eyebrows, can we have that be reviewed as a seconder by a subcommittee of Commissioner Hirschbein and Hudson?
I have a question regarding Mr. Woods' comment about including, I'm trying to get your point again. Not the bike boxes.
Asking
oh, no,
for a revised
oh, no,
condition.
Revising the negative declaration with respect to traffic counts and using a different industry standard. Can that be done after the vote, or do we really have to have that incorporated in an amendment to Nicole's work before we vote on the project?
At this point, I'm going to call Nicole forward and have her respond to that. Thank you.
First, I'd like to apologize. I do not know the manufacturing trip generation number off the top of my head. However, we have done analyses early on, before there was much data, on manufacturing versus other land use types. You know it off the top of your head?
No, I don't. What I was going to suggest that we could think of, I believe the county, we use the county's methodology, right, for analyzing traffic, and that the county does have a de minimis threshold of, I think, 50
peak hour trips per
So
intersection.
long, and I think that's why this didn't get up to 50 peak hour trips, right?
That is correct.
So-
and therefore, it didn't require
So
an
if we weren't looking for a
analysis.
threshold of revised use, I don't know how we would condition that, but for any revised use that would have more than 50 peak hour trips would require future traffic analysis, because that's the standard.
And I would also state that we can make an amendment to the initial study traffic section that adds the trip generation for a manufacturing use. That use, that change will not significantly affect the information that is provided to you, and would therefore not require recirculation or reopening of the environmental document. And if the commission adds that to their resolution, that can be closed today.
As the seconder, I would suggest we add that.
I'm fine with that.
So Flynn, could you read back the motion to us? Oh, and the other thing is that we make all of the findings in the staff report.
So, reading back through your conditions, you are adopting a negative declaration with the amendment to the language in the initial study relative to traffic, as has been discussed, and we'll ask Ms. Chris to assist us in making that correction. Also with the revised conditions as proposed by staff, adding the condition relative to the extension of the sidewalk from the I-10 off-ramp to the property, with the condition that the eyebrows for the dispensary be enhanced and that there be a subcommittee of members Hirschbein and Hudson to review those details. And finally, that a bike box be provided at each of the 4 buildings there on the site. One of the other things that I would add, if the commission would accept that, is the corrections that I made earlier, that in the conditional use permit, it identifies that this is for both medical and adult use, and
Right.
then identifies the manufacturing use as being added to that.
And I'll accept that as the seconder. And the other is the revised landscape plan showing the ground cover as at least 3/8 gravel. I think it's desert gold, am I correct?
And we will make that correction and add that condition.
Are you okay with that? Any other conditions and any comments on the motion as made? Can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Donenfeld?
Yes.
Hirschbein?
No.
Donenfeld? I'm sorry, Hudson?
Yes.
Marosi?
Yes.
Woods?
Yes.
Vice Chair Callardine?
Yes.
And Chair Wormick?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1-0.
Does anybody need a break? We're okay. At this point, we're going to take a 10-minute break. We'll be back at 2:45.
if this.
One minute late we are. Calling the meeting of the Planning Commission back to order. We are at item 2C, which is J5 Infrastructure on behalf of AT&T Mobility for a conditional use permit to install a wireless communication facility consisting of 12 8-foot-tall panel antennas on the rooftop of an existing warehouse building located at 770 South Gene Autry Trail. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Planning Commission. So this is a conditional use permit for a wireless facility. And as you said, it's going to be mounted on an existing building located in an M10. But first, I also want to bring to your attention that this CUP is a type 2 CUP, meaning that your action today will be making a recommendation to the City Council, who has the final action. Again, it is a conditional use permit for a wireless facility, and this is going to be mounted on an existing building. There will be 12 antennas as part of this facility. 8 of them, the 12 will be mounted on 2 locations on the rooftop. So 8 of them will be located on the north easterly portion of the building, and the rest 4 will be mounted on the southeasterly portion of the building.
Can you show us where on the building map?
Yes, I'm going to do that after a very brief background. I will go through my exhibits to point where those will be located to you. So, as I said, this type of use is allowed within the M1 zoning district. The height of this building is currently 30 feet. The zoning do allow up to 40 feet. So in addition to the building, when the antennas are mounted on it, along with the screening, it will bring the overall height to 38. So it will still be within the allowable height in that district. So having said that, I just want to go through the exhibits real quick. What you see now is the aerial of the site. This is the building right there where the address is. So it is bordered by Sunny Dunes, and then South Gene Autry Trail and El Camino Paracela. So that's the general area of the building. This exhibit here is the site plan, and here are the locations of the, let me just go up there. So here are the antennas. 8 of them will be mounted on this portion, and 4 of them will be mounted here. And as I mentioned, they will be screened by an 8-foot wall that will be painted to match the existing building color. The same thing will apply here. So on the northeasterly section of the site, it's where the equipment cabinet will be located, right here. So that will be built with a CMU block wall. The color will also match that of the existing building. The overall height, I think, is about 5 foot tall, which is very consistent with accessory buildings in that zoning area. So again, this is the roof itself. This is where the 8 antennas will be located, and this is where the 4 will be located. This is the rooftop that you are looking at this with that exhibit. So this is the plan of the equipment shelter itself that will house the equipment, including the generator that will be used by the antenna. This is this is just a blow-up drawing of the antenna itself. So this is the 8, and this is the 4, and this represents the screening material for the antennas. This is just the overall elevation of the existing building, and as you can see, this is the south elevation. That's where the floor will be located, and this is the northeast section of the elevation where the remainder of the antennas will be located.
Edward, what are those dotted lines? Is those the antennas behind?
This one's right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that will represent the antennas. So,
Is this coming south on Gene Autry? This is behind,
yeah, this will be coming south on Gene Autry. So I can go back to the aerial that will,
the area, I think the perspective of what you're going to see on Gene Autry would be what's important.
okay. And this is the other view. So.
Edward, are those two bump ups what's being added?
Yes.
I want to clarify that that's what's happening.
what's been, I'm sorry.
They're not there today. Okay.
Hopefully they're not there.
I know. Just want to make sure.
I did.
I think the applicant is, okay, they're not there, right? Okay, thank you. All right.
No, you can see in the bottom picture the existing, the current condition and the proposed condition.
Okay, thank you. All right. So, so essentially, this is what the project is. This is this last picture here. That is what the building should look like today. Right, so.
I'm driving toward 111 if I were in that VW or the truck. Or driving,
You're driving away.
I'm driving toward Vistacino if I was in the truck.
Oh, if you're in the truck, yeah, that's right.
You're going north, aren't you?
Yeah,
going
if you're going
toward
north,
Ramon?
not to be taking you towards Ramon.
Okay.
Yeah.
But where the picture's
And
taken,
so-
you're going south.
And so that same view, where are the towers?
Okay.
That's the opposite direction, right?
So that would be going to south.
This is going north on Gene Autry.
That's on Sunny.
Yeah. Okay. So overall, staff is, the only concern that we have are essentially the two locations, so it's two proposed locations, and that one of them seems to be very visible from the public right away. Yeah, and especially when you look at the comparison of the existing building, the plane and the height of it, and when you look at the, so let me take you back to, yeah. So when you look at that screening there, so our recommendation, the recommended condition to Planning Commission is to relocate these either to the middle of the rooftop or move it to the edge where the four antennas are currently located. Those will be less visible from the public right away. So again, it is a type 2 conditional CUP. Your action is to make a recommendation to the planning, to the city council, assuming you are fine with the conditions that staff has recommended. Additional findings in support of the CUP are included in your staff report. It is a public hearing, so that will conclude my staff report. The reps of the applicants are here to make any additional presentation to the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Questions for staff, please, starting with Commissioner Wood, if you have any.
So we know that putting cell towers on buildings adds a lot of value to the building and the real estate. Does the staff ever massage the applicant or work with the applicant on getting like enhancements to landscaping as an example with an application that has this many towers on it?
We would do that if it were to be a monopalm, for instance, if it were to be if the locations were not on a rooftop, for instance, yeah, we do require enhancement of landscaping to screen these. If it were to be a standalone cell tower, yes, we would do. But in this case, it's on a rooftop, so staff did not see the need to ask for additional landscaping in this case. We will not, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Amouzzi?
So the applicant wasn't able to produce a simulation based on the recommendations of staff moving the,
No, and in fairness to the applicant, it was a little late before we arrived at that conclusion, but I did call the applicant to let him know, and I did ask them to, because those locations are based on studies by their engineers, so I did ask her to perhaps invite their engineers along today in case of any impact that a relocation might cause, so.
do we have any sense of what it would look like? Would you see, from this perspective, would you see, I guess we should ask the applicant.
Well, so say for instance, if it is moved to the middle or to the center of the rooftop, it will be less visible from.
Would it be visible at all?
Maybe to some extent, I cannot say exactly, but it would be. It would. I believe that will be much. It will be less impactful.
Well, why don't we take questions of staff first, and then I'll open the public hearing.
That's a question for the applicant, okay.
Yeah, that is a question for the applicant. Commissioner Hudson?
No questions of staff.
Commissioner Callardine?
Yeah, looking at the developer's proposal, how high are the antennas going to be above the base of the roof, and then how high is the new parapet going to be?
So the new parapet will be 8 foot tall. The current height of the building is 30 feet. So it will have an overall height of about 36 because of the current.
What elevation is the top of the antennas at then?
So let me show you.
That may be a question for the applicant.
I mean, these illustrations say that you would not see the antennas at least from those locations. And I want to confirm that that's the case.
So, I mean, look at these. I think I have the drawings, so.
Do we have other questions of staff? At this point, Edward, I think it's all technical. Why don't we have the applicant?
I do have the answer to that question. So the overall height will be 38 feet and 6 inches. The top of that, of the screen.
Okay, and the antenna height is?
The antenna height.
So the antennas are below the top elevation of the parapet?
Correct, yeah.
Thank you.
At this point, I'm going to open the public hearing. The applicant, if they would come up, you have 10 minutes, and then we will take public testimony, 3 minutes for members of the public, a 3-minute rebuttal for the applicant, and we will call you back to ask questions. At this point, though, hold your questions until we've gone through most of the public hearing.
Afternoon, Madam Chair and or Commissioner, sorry. The antennas will be at 38.6. And I will call up the RF engineer to explain why we cannot relocate into the center, because we would have to increase the height by significant due to the shadowing of the RF emissions. So I can call up the RF engineer now.
Please.
Okay.
That'll be part of your timing this, Commissioner?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. If you'd state your name.
My name is Gene Voskobonic. I'm with AT&T RF Engineering.
Fine, and your presentation, we're not asking questions of you yet, but she.
So yes, I guess I'm here to comment on the shadowing effect. So basically, the reason we're in the business of providing coverage to the customers, and we want to provide the best service possible with every cell tower that we have. In order for RF to work, it has to propagate properly. It has to propagate properly. RF energy has to propagate properly. The reason we use antennas is antennas is a medium by which we propagate the RF energy. We generate it as a radio, it propagates out. So not to get too technical, but I have to get technical to explain the shadowing. RF, as you guys know from physics, you may probably remember, part of modeling RF energy is as a waveform. It's a wave. And as a wave, it has certain characteristics. And as a waveform, when it propagates, as soon as it comes out, it has to have clear line of sight. It cannot have any obstructions. Once a wave has obstructions, it begins to be clipped. You know, it loses energy, and it deflects, it reflects, it refracts. And as opposed to 100% energy that comes out of antenna, all of a sudden now you have, after clipping and refracting and blocking by this and that, you might have 50% of 30% of energy coming out, which is not good. All of a sudden our coverage is sacrificed. That's why cell towers are good to be on monopoles, because usually when you're on a monopole, if there's no near field obstructions, we call them, it's perfect propagation characteristics. The wave propagates as far as it goes. Basically, the only free space will stop it. And the customers that we're trying to serve will get the maximum coverage. Now, when you deal with the rooftop, you have, naturally, anywhere you are on the roof, any object that's in front of the antenna serves as an obstruction. It begins to clip the energy. Because when the energy comes out of the antenna, it's a waveform. And it has certain shape. And any object next to it begins to reflect it, clip it, absorb it. Yes, exactly. Attenuate the energy. So, again, there's something called reactive near field. Within that near field, if anything obstructs the signal, it will not be the signal that's supposed to be there. So when we use our propagation tools to model how far a site like this will cover, let's say 1.5 mile away in this direction, maybe half a mile in this direction, we presume that the energy will come out normally and will not be attenuated 30 to 60 degrees right off right off the bat. Now, for that to happen, this near field has to be overcome. And the near field for our bandwidth, AT&T bandwidth goes from 700 to to about 2.5 gigahertz. 700 megahertz to 2.5 gigahertz. The lowest bands that we have, 700 and 800, for that wavelength, believe it or not, I did the calculation while I was sitting here, the near field is 680 feet. 680 feet. Now, just to give you an example, an idea, this building is about 200 feet long and 100 feet wide. Now, not to say that we need 680 feet clearance on this building, but that's, so basically, unless you clear 680 feet, there begin to be obstructions. In order for that not to be shadowing or waveform clipping, so to speak, you have to rise above. If you rise far enough, what we call Fresnel zone clearance, vertical clearance, then that near field will be overcome. In other words, obviously, if you go 300 feet above the building, it doesn't matter that you need 680 feet for near field. There's not going to be anything around it. Having said that, right now our antennas are located almost next to the parapet. The parapet rises about 1.5 feet up from the rooftop, and the bottom of our antenna clears the parapet by half a foot, 6 inches. And depending, I think the gentleman here showed, our antennas are, for one sector, which is looking 90 degrees there, the antenna array is parallel to the parapet. The one that's looking at 330 degrees true north is angled. So a few of the antennas are actually a couple of feet back from the parapet. And then the 210-degree sector is also angled. I don't know if you have that demonstration, if you have the drawing. Keep going. You're right there. Stop right there. Yeah. So the bottom one is our 210. So if you see the antennas that are further away from the parapet, they look like, if you scale it, probably about anywhere from 1 foot to 3 feet from the parapet. Now, why am I saying that? I did also the calculation for what do you need to clear for 700 and 800 band. What clearance do you need for perfect waveform to come out? So for half a foot, for half a foot distance from the parapet, you would need 9 inches. For 1 foot distance from the parapet, you need 1 foot. for 2 feet distance from the parapet, you need 1.5 foot of vertical clearance in order for the antenna energy to propagate. Now, those few antennas are probably at least 2 feet out from the parapet. For 2 feet, you need 1.5 foot. We are only clearing it by 6 inches. So already, other than the antenna, other than the 90-degree sector, which is flush with the parapet, and maybe the first antenna in the 330-degree sector, and the 200-degree sector, all the other antennas are already sacrificing coverage because of the nature of this building and because of the way that RF energy will propagate. We're already somewhat sacrificing it. I just want to give you an idea of what we're facing. So if we were to move back, let's say, 10 feet with each antenna from the parapet, we would need 3.4 foot clearance from the bottom of our antenna, and the bottom antenna counts just as much as the top and the middle because the radiating elements are all throughout the antenna. So the very bottom antenna also has radiating elements. It radiates, if the antenna is this big, it radiates like that. So basically, 10 feet away, we would need almost 3.5 foot clearance from the bottom antenna to the parapet. So now, to take it to a realistic extent, this building is 200 feet long and 100 feet wide, roughly. So the longest distance from the center of the building to the corner, the hypotenuse of the triangle, so to speak, that calculates to be 112 feet. So for 112 feet, the calculation yields 12-foot vertical clearance. 12-foot vertical clearance to the bottom of the antenna. So from the top of the parapet, which is at 40 feet, I think, 40 foot, right? To the bottom antenna would have to be 12 feet, add another 8 feet for the length of the antenna, and now you're looking at the top of the structure being 20 feet. So if we can get that, then we will propagate RF energy just fine, and everything will be fine. So that's what we're dealing with. Other than having to raise us to such a height, already we're sacrificing at the parapet. We don't mind staying at that location.
Your time is up, but we
I'm
will
sorry.
call you back. So
I hope I
I
wasn't-
just want to continue the public hearing, see if anybody else from the public would like to speak on this issue. You can stay here.
Okay.
Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak? There being no members of the public, you have a 3-minute rebuttal, and then we can ask questions. I know that we have questions. So please go forward.
Do you want to add any more?
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to add something that representing AT&T, we're in the business of providing cell phone coverage to customers. There are many AT&T customers, and this particular cell tower is falling into a location where we know we have weak coverage. Now not everyone is AT&T's customers, and I know it's a business, but there are AT&T customers currently there, and they're lacking in coverage, just like I'm sure there are other people who have other cell phone carriers who are lacking coverage. And there are some important areas we want to cover there. I wrote them down. Obviously, the airport is number one. We want to cover the airport through and through. Whatever in building structures there are, even people sitting in the plane, we want to make sure we have great coverage. Right now, we're lacking in coverage as AT&T Wireless in that area. To the northeast, we have Cimarron and Ascena golf clubs in the residential areas around there. To the east, we have commercial developments, Lowe's, Walmart, Office Depots. We don't have in-building coverage there for AT&T. We want to bring in-building coverage to our customers there. And then we have to the south, Tahits and Cathedral Canyon golf clubs, all the surrounding nice opulent residential communities. And then the thoroughfares, major thoroughfares, Route 111, Ramon, and whatever is residential, commercial over there. Roughly the radius of this site, because it's a low site, it's going to be between a mile and a half at most. It's not going to be that much. And if you were to move us to the center at that height of the antenna, it wouldn't be even half a mile, wouldn't even be a quarter mile. It wouldn't be nothing. So that's what we're dealing with.
We will have questions for you. I think staff had 2 separate proposals, so maybe you could, one was to move it to a different place on the parapet, or the other was to move it to the center. Am I correct?
Correct. We were hoping, because of the bulk of the appearance of the screens around the antennas. I want to make sure the applicant understands that we're appreciative that you're screening the antennas. We don't always get that. But just because of the location at the corner of the building, particular there at the intersection of Gene Autry and Sunny Dunes, it's such a mass there at the corner of the building that we prefer to see it move back to away from the edge of the parapet towards the center of the building, just so it doesn't loom so far over that intersection. The other thought that we had was locating all of the antennas at the northeast corner of the building where the 8 are, if the other 4 could be moved. I think based on your presentation here that you said that you need to have those 4 antennas in that location in order to achieve the propagation that you need for that. So it doesn't sound like we could move all of them to that northeast corner of the building, unfortunately.
Is that your answer, that you can't move all of them to the northeast corner of the building?
That's correct. He stated correctly, because that sector that has to be in the southwest corner, it's oriented at 210 degrees. Am I right? Is that southwest?
Yes.
Southwest, yeah.
So
it's oriented at 210 degrees true north, and it has to be in that corner, ideally.
So I think the question we will have, and maybe staff has, is there any place other than that corner you can orient those and still get coverage? And maybe you could point to the rooftop and tell us if there's any place other than that front visible corner.
Well, it has to be on that side of the building. We cannot go with that sector anywhere else. With that type of low clearance above the parapet, it has to be on that type of side of the building. I mean, we could move it.
Do you want to point to where you could move it?
Just on, okay.
There's a.
So right now, we're saying we're going to be on this corner right here. I'm sorry?
So they could do it with a.
Aerial.
So.
Upper left corner. Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. We're talking about the sector here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Hold on, which way is true north? Is it this way?
No, north is top.
North is up. Okay, so the 210 is going to be right here. Yeah, so ideally it should be here. If we move it to this corner, given it's offset by 30 degrees from 180. Just from an engineering design standpoint, this is an inferior location to that, because the sector has what we call a beam width, a span of energy where most of the energy comes out. For this antenna, it's about 65 degrees. So it's about 30 degrees in each direction from where we're pointing. So if we're pointing at 210, off of 180, which is here, we're offset 30 degrees. This direction where the building is 270. So from 210 to 270, that's 50 degrees. I'm sorry, that's 60 degrees. And we will begin to attenuate some of the energy for the sector, and also will reflect some of the energy from this building unnecessarily. So it's not the best location. We could live with this, but I would have to ask for a raise in the height of the antenna to achieve better clearance, so the building does not become an obstruction. But the best location is here, because here nothing really blocks it, and then we can have the minimal clearance above the parapet at that location.
Were there questions? If I can direct questions, and then we can take it to discussion. Commissioner Hudson, did you have a question?
I think Commissioner Hirschbein has been raising his hand.
Just for my own information, the screen around these things, that presents no problem to the energy dissipation?
It does somewhat. It's an RF transparent screen. We call it stealth screening, and it does attenuate it by what we call 1 or 2 dB. But attenuates it maybe by 10 to 20%. But this is something we have to live with. Yeah, ideally there would be no screen, but the screening is necessary for us.
The other question I have is, if you were to move, just say even the 4 units at the corner, at the southwest corner, to the middle of the building, just those 4, how high would it have to be to propagate to the current number that you have? And let's assume for a minute that you're going to do that without your 20% loss of screening.
We can assume that we're not gonna have any screening?
Just, you're gonna move those, in my scenario, you're gonna move those 4 units at at the southwest corner to the middle of the building. You're not gonna have any screening, so you're not gonna have that 20% drop in your propagation factor. But to get the same propagation at that corner, how high would those units have to be? What would be the top of those units, those 4 units?
Well, I would tell you that based on my numbers, I would like to have at least a 2-foot clearance from the bottom of the antenna, from the bottom of my antenna to the parapet. Currently, we only have 6 inches.
Okay, so it'd be another 1.5 feet higher
Yes,
than what it is now
yes,
at the center.
yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Yeah.
Commissioner Hudson?
If it's in the center, yeah. Hmm?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the excellent presentation. I learned a lot.
Okay.
I guess my first question is, maybe you dealt with this and I missed it and I apologize. Was there an option of actually mounting your vertical antennae on the building face itself, just below the parapet?
I cannot comment on that. I think Melissa might want to mention that. Melissa? Oh.
Sandeep said it was too low. It would make the propagate down here at 30 feet versus 38.
So as an engineer, I inherited this particular project just a few weeks ago. So this is, I guess the history is that maybe, I guess that's the answer.
Okay.
They probably considered it, and it was too low. And I agree, it is too low. Because given the terrain and the clutter, so what we call over there,
Understood.
it's
just-
pretty low.
We've seen
Yeah.
building mounted before, but I understand its height problems. I guess my other question, or maybe just I'll throw it out there as an option. To me, these 2 screened elements on the roof are just awkwardly placed on the building. If the one at the south end of the building was centered, this building has, it's ironic, I think, this is a tilt-up building that has some architectural elements added to it, these sort of gable-roofed forms. What if, rather than being on the corner, your screened, I'll just call it a penthouse, I know it's not that, was centered on the south facade of the building, and the companion screened element on the north end of the building was centered there? I think it would just give more order to these elements.
Point it out, if you do.
I know what you're saying, sir. Yes.
Okay. Do I need a mic?
Yes.
I think you're saying that you want us to be like right here and right there, right? At each center, yes.
I have to get a mic here. Yes, that's correct.
Right.
I think, again, we have, where are the images? Even here, but especially the one, Edward, could you that one, to me, see, on that elevation, sir, if you could turn around and look at the monitor. See, there's that sort of peaked element, that grayish element. Could we place your screened element directly in line over that? I'm just thinking, to me as an architect, that would give it at least some order.
So right here?
And this view, yes, right there, and then the companion piece on the south side. Maybe that, along with moving it back just slightly more from the edge of the building, maybe giving it, the enclosure, your screen element, a slightly different color, so it doesn't try to blend in, in such a, I wouldn't say monotonous, but just tries to blend in too much. I think that would at least give those locations some architectural order.
Okay. Your point is well taken. For the sake of covering the areas to the north, northwest, and northeast, this is fine. I'm talking about the sector which is looking at 330 currently, right here. There's a sector which is looking at 330 true north, so we could do that. For the sake of this sector, as I mentioned, we can move it to the south. However, we do have a sector looking at 90 degrees. That's the one looking at Walmart along, what is that street called? Ramon Road, Walmart, Office Depot, Lowe's. That's the sector that's going to be looking this way. So if we move it here, the energy of that wave is like this. It goes out. So this half of the energy has to come out like this. this building then becomes, along with the parapet along here, becomes the obstruction for that sector. As long as it's sitting at the edge of the building, it overcomes the obstruction. As you move it back, now it's 50 feet in. If you can draw the hypotenuse here, it's going to be probably, this is 50, this is going to be 100, or whatever the hypotenuse is, probably about another, like I said, 112. It's going to become an obstruction just for that sector. So for the sake of the sector looking at 90 degrees true north, that would compromise our coverage quite a bit. Yes. So I'm saying for the sake of the sector, no, we cannot do that. I mean, it would compromise our coverage unless we raise the antennas.
What if you split, rather than 2 locations, you split it into 3? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, that could be done.
Okay.
As long as that
just
sector.
throwing things out there, but.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah, that wouldn't be a problem.
You'd still need you'd still need that one corner covered, though. Even if there were 3, you'd still have that one issue with respect to having to be on a corner.
You're talking about this?
Yes.
These sector antennas? Yes, they
Yes.
need
The
to be
back
here.
one?
They need to be here.
Yeah.
They could be, as a matter of fact, by the way, they could be here, they could be in the middle too. So if you're gonna split 3, you can put this one in the middle, you can put that one in the middle, and that one in the middle, that'll work. Yes.
That's exactly what I've started to
Yeah.
think.
I have a question. What would it look like if there weren't any parapets at all, the screening at all? I mean, are these wide towers? I mean, what
I'm sorry, what?
Without parapet.
what would it look like without without the screening?
Oh, without the screen? The antenna is roughly, depending on the antenna that we use, and we use different antennas depending on the band, but the biggest antenna we have is about 20-inch wide, about 4 or 5 inches thick, and 8 feet long.
8 feet tall.
8 feet tall. Yeah.
So is it, just
So
to
it's-
put it in
it's-
layman's terms, is it ugly?
Well, you can.
Probably not to you.
No, I mean, you can paint it to match the building. You can paint it with whatever design you want using RF transparent paint. But it's just an antenna, yeah, you can paint it whatever you want. It has a metallic backing.
You see what I'm driving at? Take away these ugly screens and just have the towers, you know, I mean, just let them come up.
Poles sticking up there.
But they're not that tall, right? How tall are they if you took the screen away?
8 feet, still the same height.
8 feet. I don't know.
I'm fine without screening them. I think the screening we're providing is more for aesthetics. But if you want to take away the stealth screening, that's fine.
I just think that the
Yes?
screening is
We'll
not
actually have
attractive and it
more-
stands out. Whereas if it was just these thin antenna,
From
yeah.
engineering standpoint, I don't like the screens at all. I don't want them.
Can you
But
shorten
we're
it
doing
without
them-
can you shorten it without the screen? How much can you shorten it? The height,
the
if you
height-
took away the screens.
Well, it's already barely clearing the parapet.
All right,
It's
all right.
It's clearing it half by half a foot.
So it would still
6
be 8
inches.
feet.
Yeah, I can't go below the parapet, then I'm shooting completely
okay.
into something.
Thanks.
Yeah, sure.
Are there more questions for him? It's before the commission, thank you.
Okay.
Just
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
comments, but also how we proceed. It seems to me like the way it's placed isn't going to be acceptable. The city staff's recommendation doesn't work. Possibly, I would think, possibly a subcommittee of some 1 or 2 people to work with the applicant to find the correct placing and have it come back.
Madam Chair, what I might suggest, rather than putting together a subcommittee, you all have had some suggestions and gotten feedback from the engineer relative to various placements. What I might request is that we continue this item to the next meeting, and hopefully that will give the applicant some time to review those additional locations with us. And then we'll come back to you with the proposal in terms of what those would look like.
So we will have a motion to continue. I would like comments that we send this back with. I'm going to make a motion to continue it to our next meeting. But comments,
I have a comment.
well, I'm going to go around the
Oh.
room, but I'm going to start with Commissioner Woods, if you have a comment, and then go around.
I agree with the motion. I also agree with Commissioner Hudson. I think they can be the screens can be more architectural to match the building, be it the blue or whatever, and I'll leave that to the architects on the thing. I also think that it is, if we have the opportunity at this point. It looks like some of the landscaping, especially along Sunny Dunes, has gone away. That we asked for some landscaping enhancements along the exterior of the building on both Sunny Dunes and Gene Autry.
I'd like to see some simulations of what it would look like without the screening. The same views, but without the screening.
Commissioner Hudson?
I'd agree with Commissioner Maruzzi. I would encourage as many visual simulations as possible, not just directly adjacent to the building, but quite a ways up Gene Autry, in either direction. I think, this building the antenna will be seen from quite a distance. So any sort of further tools that we could better understand this, I think would be much better.
Commissioner Hirschbein, and then I'll go back down this way.
Yeah, adding to those simulations, which I think is a great idea, is perhaps the one I started off with, getting out of the applicant, that by bringing the unit to the middle of the building, you'd only raise it by 1.5 feet. So I'd like to see that both screened and not screened, how that looks.
Commissioner Donenfeld?
I have nothing more to add. I concur with what's been said before.
Same here. I did have one more question, though. Could you get answered the next go around? I don't know what you call it. This is a mode 4 type of cell system, or it's a cell system level 4. I forget. 4G. 4G, right? Will these antennas work for 5G?
They will evolve into 5G.
They will evolve into 5G. Okay, thank you.
And just a comment, the proposal before us didn't work, just much too bulky. We really need to see something else, so we anticipate that you'll bring something back to us, possibly more architectural, looking at different simulations. But I just want to say really clearly, driving past that almost every day, I wouldn't vote for it in terms of the way it was presented and how it looked, but I really want to see you get the cell coverage you need, so I hope that you bring us back things that you think will work. And with that, there was a motion. Did I have a second?
Second.
There's a motion to continue this to a date certain, Flynn. Is 2 weeks enough for you?
No, we're going to need more than 2 weeks.
Well, we're not here.
No, we're not here in August.
We're not here in August, so September 12th?
Yeah, that's going to be September 12th, because to get several options, we're going to have to go to the drawing board. It's going to take longer than 2 weeks.
Great.
Present something good, not.
And we'd rather you take your time and get things that work for you and work for us. We're very sympathetic to this, but we do want it to work for the community. So the motion, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Donenfeld?
Yes.
Hirschbein?
Yes.
Hudson?
Yes.
Maruzzi?
Yes.
Woods?
Yes.
Vice Chair Callardine?
Yes.
Chair Warmick?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Other business, we have the election of officers today. I don't know if people have thought about it. We can take this up today, or we can take it up at our next meeting. So Flynn, with the situation we find ourselves in, what have you seen?
Here is what we have done with our other boards and commissions, specifically the AAC and the Historic Site Preservation Board. They too are in a similar situation where they have members who are term limited, whose terms have been extended for 6 months. In the case of the AAC, they chose to reappoint Maria Song to the chair position for an additional 6 months, even though she is term limited, with the idea that they'll hold elections again in January to appoint a new chair. And then they appointed Mr. Jakeway as vice chair, with the idea that he would receive some training in the interim as vice chair and potentially could move on to the chair position. Same thing with the Historic Site Preservation Board. Again, they have a member who is term limited. So the fact that you have a chair and a vice chair who are term limited, will be leaving the commission in January, does not mean that they still could not serve in those capacities. So again, you do have some flexibility. I anticipate that we would then hold elections again in January to appoint a new chair and vice chair.
Do we have nominations for Commissioner Hudson?
Yes, I would like to nominate Chair Wormuck to continue for 6 more months in the position of chair. And then I would like to nominate Michael Hirschbein to be our vice chair.
Are there other nominations?
Can I decline? Can I ask a question about that?
Of course.
I was at the AAC meeting where they set up that program, and that was with the clear intent that the vice chair, the new vice chair, was being sort of groomed for the position of chair. And I was going to say, before Mr. Hudson generously nominated me to vice chair, my comment was going to be, I'd like to see the status quo maintained so we're not prejudicing any new members of the board come January to who should be chair. That would be my suggestion.
Are there other nominations? Other comments? So is that a counter motion, or did you decline, or did you accept? Because you're not.
I'll make it a counter motion. That we maintain the status quo with the intent that we're leaving the position unprejudiced so that the new board members have the freedom to select who, not select, but vote for who they feel best suited.
The vice chair doesn't do very much.
Well, it's not a question of the vice chair doing very much. It's a question that the AAC specifically said we're grooming this person for chairmanship.
Yeah,
and I think that's...
Yeah, I don't want to suggest that it's an ascension to the throne.
No, I
The
get
vice
that.
chair is the
I get
ascension
that,
to the
but
throne.
I think there is some...
And that wasn't my intent, Michael, to be honest.
Okay, I would still like, thank you. I would still like to leave it open. I would make a counter motion for the status quo.
We have a second to neither of the motions, the counter motion.
I'll second the counter.
Okay. I think we comments on it and then call the question. Call the question.
Commissioner Donenfeld?
Yes.
Hirschbein?
Yes.
Hudson?
Yes.
Maruzi?
Yes.
Woods?
Yes.
Vice Chair Callardine?
Yes.
And Chair Wormuck?
I'm going to abstain since it's me. I'd rather not vote for myself.
You're not a good politician.
No, I'm not. That's why I'm on the planning commission and not a. and not
Motion
a
passes
council.
6-0. 6-1.
Okay, so we will have Kathy Weremuck as chair and Lynn Callardine as vice chair. And again, they are term limited. Their terms will end on December 31st of this year, and we will hold elections in January of 2019 for a new chair and vice chair.
In the past, city council's been a little tardy in appointing the new commissioners. Will the termed out ones stay until the new ones are appointed, or will we be down to one, two, three?
Yeah, if we find
five
ourselves,
people?
if we find ourselves in that situation, my recommendation is that we would ask Ms. Weremuck and Mr. Callardine to continue serving until we have
Or to
new
come to
members in
meetings.
I
place.
can come to 2 months more or something like that.
What?
I think my absolute term limit is 2 months after January.
Well, by the extension of the city council, I don't think that it would be an issue.
We are now at planning commissioner reports, comments, and requests. Commissioner Marucci?
On Monday, I attended a neighborhood information meeting that was organized by Russ Youthy, who just stepped out, regarding the golf course conversion and just trying to answer questions that the public had about what was going on. Flynn and David Newell made a terrific presentation that explained in great detail what's going on and answered questions. I mean, there was an hour and 45 minutes it was a long meeting, and yet people stayed. It was a good 50 plus people there. So I want to thank them for taking the time to do that. And I think it helped the community a lot to better understand the issues that we're dealing with. So thank you for that. The other thing is this the right time to request an agenda item for the next meeting? Okay.
Yes.
One of the things that was raised at the Monday meeting, and I've heard from other people in the public, is this question of a moratorium, putting a moratorium on any golf course conversions until the city council has had a chance to decide on the ordinance. This is something that we know the city council has to decide. I would request that the planning commission consider this issue at our next meeting and then make a recommendation one way or the other. Are we allowed to do that?
What I might suggest is that we have an informational item on moratoria in general, and we will forward your discussion from that to the city council. So no vote per se, but rather a discussion on the
Why can't
item.
we have a vote?
It would not be a formal recommendation, but it could be, say, consensus of the commission making a suggestion to the council or something.
And that's because just...
Well, moratoria are not really within the planning commission's jurisdiction. Moratoria originate and are finalized by the council.
Okay.
They're basically intended as like an emergency interim measure.
Mhm.
So again, from a policy standpoint, if the commission would like to discuss it, we could certainly put it on the agenda. And if the commission has some suggestions they want forwarded onto the council, it just wouldn't be like a formal recommendation as you would have with the CUP you just heard.
And this has been done before. Is it fairly common to make these sorts of...
I wouldn't say it's fairly common, but yes, it does happen from time to time.
How do the rest of us feel about that?
Question, would a moratoria at some point, how soon we have to have a moratoria to have it apply to, moratorium to have it apply to Bel Air Greens?
Typically, I'll say as a general principle, property development rights do not vest until they are approved. And so if somebody submits an app, now there's some exceptions like in the Subdivision Map Act where if you submit an application, that application has to be processed under the regulations that existed at the time of the application. However, all other land use entitlements do not enjoy vesting until it's actually been approved. So if the city were to change the rules mid-application or place a moratorium, that would still bind the project. That's part of the reason why moratoria are used, because an application's been filed with the city, it causes concern because the city may not have the regulations in place.
I understand.
So they put the
So
moratorium
it would
by
be, if this was done within 6 months, it would definitely affect Bel Air Greens.
If they don't have vested approved entitlements, yeah.
They haven't actually filed an application, have they?
Correct. They have not filed a formal application. They have filed a pre-application, but not their formal application.
Right, so if a moratorium went into effect before they filed an application, that would...
If the moratorium went into effect before they got their approvals, it would still be sufficient to stop the project.
So I think it's worth a discussion, but I wanted to see what the rest... Okay.
Mhm.
I think it's a good idea. Thank you.
And the consensus of the commission is that we would like to discuss it.
Yes.
Yeah, we talked about that a couple of months ago, but
Yes.
it wasn't ripe then.
Any other commission reports, requests, comments? Might want to hear from there was one other issue that we raised today in subcommittee, but also wanted to raise with you, which is that people have a hard time finding the information about when subcommittees meet. And there are two possibilities that would make it easier. Right now, you have to go to the Planning Commission page and scroll down and see what's there. But could it be on the Planning Commission agenda where you go to Planning Commission meetings and it shows subcommittee meetings? That's a little easier to find. And the other, is it possible to do subcommittee meetings on the city agenda? Right now, we're not on either on the calendar. Right now, we're not on either of those. And we've had people tell us that they can't find when our committee meets. And I know that I usually look at meetings and I don't see it. And sort of accidentally found it today when I was playing around.
And that's not the intent, to
It's not.
accidentally find it.
Right. I mean, I
So,
think-
yeah, we'll look at both of those options. I'm assuming Mr. Newell was there in the meeting when he heard
He
those
was,
comments?
yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
he does a lot of our website updating on the planning pages, so I'll have a discussion with him about how we might better locate that, so people can find them easily and readily.
There was also a suggestion made that perhaps the station, the television station that broadcasts, put up a calendar periodically that shows what's going to be coming up, so that the people who do watch that could find out that way as well. That was brought up by the public at Monday's meeting.
Okay.
Commissioner Woods?
Flynn, I don't know if this is an appropriate time to ask you this, but I have been asked many times about the development that's on Palm Canyon, directly across from the previous Magruder dealership, where all of the palm trees have been ripped out and it's been stagnant. And I've been asked repeatedly, so are you able to give just a brief update for the record?
Certainly. The Cameron project is the one that you're speaking about. They recently went before the city council to receive an extension of their subdivision improvement agreement. As part of city council granting that extension, they are required to do the improvements to South Palm Canyon, which is what you see occurring right now with the palm trees being out and the sidewalk ripped up. They will be required to improve South Palm Canyon to the required width as we get into redoing the bridge there over Tockwitz Creek. They'll be replacing the palm trees, reinstalling the sidewalk. They'll be responsible for doing the new signal at the intersection of Mesquite and South Palm Canyon, as well as installing a median. So all of those improvements are underway. They were expected to be complete by September. It looks like it might be a little bit longer than that, considering we're here at mid-July right now, but those are underway. Also, as part of that, they will be required to install interim landscaping around the perimeter of the site and a tubular steel fence to improve the appearance of the site as well. That landscape plan is going back to the AAC on July the 16th. We hope that it will be approved and then begin installation in September. So there are a number of things underway with that site, but we do appreciate your
When do
question.
we get the actual development?
That is unknown, and that's why they're required to do the interim improvements.
How long was the extension for?
The extension was for 2 years,
Starting?
April of 2018.
We were told, I was involved somewhat in this whole process, and you can verify if this is correct. We were told that the property owner intends to sell the property, so that's why they wanted to go ahead with the improvements.
Yeah, and if they sell the property, they would be bound to the entitlement that has been approved, and all of the infrastructure obviously is in place on the site, so they would be building out the project just as it was approved if they were to sell it.
Does that 2-year extension fall within the new guidelines that we've adopted?
It's a little bit different in that this is an extension of the subdivision improvement agreement. Because they have exercised the entitlement, they're no longer required to extend the entitlement.
I've never heard that term before, subdivision improvement agreement. What is that?
We can talk about this a little bit later offline.
Are they going to pick up the trail too, or is that going to go with the development?
That would go with the development. There will be landscaping along that side, but they won't be improving the trail itself. It will remain a DG path.
If the subdivision improvement agreement terminates, then the project loses its entitlements and there would be something new that's would eventually come forward?
Not necessarily. If the subdivision improvement agreement terminates, the city calls the bonds, completes the off-site improvements.
It's a bonding issue.
We did that on Encina.
Any other questions or?
What's happening with Dream?
Dream is
Hole in the ground.
it's underway. I don't believe that they have the above-ground building permits issued yet. They are in the process of getting those finalized. They had their below-ground, they're doing the underground parking garage. That portion of the work has been approved and is under construction. They are also on the city council agenda tonight to look at extending the construction hours for their concrete pour. So they're getting that in place so that they can move forward.
What about there's a hotel on North Palm Canyon where they stripped the building out?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
They were to have a new construction fence up and begin finalizing their demolition approximately 4 weeks ago. We have sent them notice that they are past that deadline and have asked them to
Is
perform.
that project sort of in limbo or gone away, or? we don't
No,
know?
not necessarily. They say that they are still looking at finalizing their financing. They're looking for an operator.
They're looking for
So
money.
they're still moving forward with the project as we understand it.
Flynn, are there other projects that we had previously approved that have now gone away because of the lack of extensions?
Without having the list in front of me, I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Could you give us a status report at our next,
Yes, I'd be happy to do
our
that.
next meeting?
I'd be happy to do that.
As a new member of the commission, is there some place that we can turn to find out the status of all these projects?
Exactly. On the Planning Department webpage, we have a link on the left-hand side of the page for project status. We do an updated sheet every month with the projects that have been approved, projects which have received their building permits, and those which haven't yet received their building permits but are still within their 2-year approval timeframe. And so again, we do update that every month, and that is available on the planning webpage.
So, for example, that assisted living facility on North Palm Canyon, that would appear there somewhere?
Yes. Yeah, that will appear on the list.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, good one. What happened to that? That guy was all set to rock and roll.
He rocked, but forgot to roll.
So our city council liaison is not with us today. Planning director's report.
I would like to get our small lot subcommittee back together, and I believe the date that we discussed was July the 24th. If members Callardine and Hirschbein would be available on the afternoon of the 24th, we'll get started on the small lot ordinance.
What time?
We were looking at 2:30 p.m.
Aren't you on that as well?
Yes. And for members, if you've gone to look at the neighborhood that Flynn asked us to take a look at, I think that's the topic of discussion.
Those lots were 5,000 square feet in that area?
They're actually between about 5,000 and 6,000 square feet. It varies a little bit, but they're in that range.
Okay.
And that's the only thing I have to report.
We are adjourned until until 10th. Oh,
Yes.
that's the other question we wanted to ask. Given that the Bel Air Greens, we anticipate we might get a lot of public testimony. I think we're scheduled to start at 10:30. Suggestion was made today that possibly we start at 10, so we know that we can end by 1 and get lunch before the Planning Commission meeting.
Okay. So we will go ahead and then revise that start time to 10 o'clock a.m. and put out the notices accordingly. We will also have a full agenda, I believe, on the afternoon session, so.
It's because everything's jamming up against it. Right?
Yeah, we won't have meetings in August, so we will have a full agenda on the 25th.
We are adjourned until 10 o'clock on the 25th.
Great, thank you.